English teachers. What topic on a write about anything essay made you lose hope in humanity? 2 stand out. First one, the prompt was if you could go back and change one thing from your life. What would it be? A young man wrote about the night his abusive alcoholic dad came home. Apparently from the story, dad came home this way often. The fateful night he wanted to change was the first time he stood up to his dad. Dad came home. Kid defended his mom and dad in a drunken rage left. Dad got into a head-on collision and died. Kid totally blamed himself for his father's death. Second story, the prompt was create a holiday and what the traditions and customs of the holiday were. A student created National Black People Day. I was like, okay. How are you going to celebrate it? She said by killing white people. I was like, what? She said, yeah. Once a year we can kill as many white people as we want. I got the counselor involved in both of them. What the F? Former English adjunct here. One time a student wrote about a first date that went horribly wrong, including running over a cat and having it stuck to his truck tires, and then vomiting at dinner. Another one that stands out wasn't a topic, but an assigned research paper. A student maintained that she didn't need sources because God told her the information. She actually cited God as a personal interview in correct MLA format. Our English teacher told us that some guy copied an article from the Italian Wikipedia thinking it was in English. How high do you have to be to not know what your own language looks like? I teach literature at a college and mostly deal with freshmen and sophomores. For our free writing unit, one of the assignments asked the students to write any original story based on your favorite fictional genre. So, one of my students wanted to do horror. I said great. That's also a favorite of mine. Go nuts. Eventually, the assignments are turned in and I'm grading them at home. I get to the kid with the horror story and it's about a serial killer who stalks women. Okay. Whatever. Nothing I haven't seen before. But then the story goes into long, excruciating detail about the next victim this killer plans on stalking, raping, murdering, a petite blonde in her early 30s who teaches English. And it just so happens I'm a petite blonde in her early 30s who, well, yeah, I didn't report it or anything since it was a creative exercise. I didn't grade him unfairly either. But I seriously couldn't look that kid in the eye ever again. My HS English teacher had to state, due to a submission the year before, that writing about your foot fetish and pleasuring yourself with your feet would not be read or graded. I was in a film class and the professor also had to clarify, due to events of last semester, submitting pornography of any kind, even with all parties consenting, for a film project will constitute an automatic failure on the assignment. I was teaching a University 101 class. Study habits. How to write essays. Time management. How to get by at college for kids who honestly aren't really ready for college. The assignment. 1 paragraph about something that interests you. One of those essays read, I am interested in blueberry muffin. Like how they round on the top and ripped on the sides. That what I like. I kept that on my fridge for a year. Until last year. My students, 7th grade, ages 12-13, had to do a science fair project. They had to create a topic with a testable theory. Does brand X detergent get more stains out than brand Y? This was accompanied with a research report of the topic. I would give the students a sample report I created. Every year, I would tell them not to copy from their sources. And I would easily find out who did. Every year. Some literally copy word for word from, of the easiest of sources. Wikipedia. Cue mad parents. Cue exact copies of the report. Side by side with the highlighted portions of the report. Not an essay, but we were doing impromptu speeches and one guy recited the Weird Al song Albuquerque word for word until the teacher finally told him to stop after 10 minutes. A Catholic high school in my hometown asked for students to write about what they would do if there were no laws or lack of morals. This was inspired by the Purge, which had been discussed in ethics class. 12 students were suspended indefinitely, 2 or 3 ended up expelled. The others returned eventually, for what they wrote. ranging from data re to human trafficking to mass shootings. Even though the assignment made it more than obvious that it was a fictional assignment, and by relating it to the purge pretty much goaded students into matching the level of lawlessness. Made national news. There were articles by psychologists for days. They even mentioned the Reddit Ask a Rapist thread and the psychologist's response to not create a feedback forum. Not a single article even came close to suggesting that if you give 17 to 19-year-olds an opening to go against good taste, that most of them would do so for shits and giggles. 2 students, the data one and the mass shooting one, did not find another school and did not graduate. Or at least had to redo their last year. Not a teacher but stepfather. Daughter was a rAskReddit kid, wrote a report about weather cut and paste from the internet. The language varied in writing style and grade level from paragraph to paragraph. I offered that rewriting in her own language was the minimum she could do to avoid making it obvious she plagiarized. She decided elementary school level was her style and chose to rewrite the college level paragraphs. When she thought an acceptable substitution of cloud depression was the weather is sad, I just gave up. In high school, we had a history essay to write about JFK, and one of my classmates wrote the entire essay by naming him Jean-Francois Kennedy. Yes, it was in France. My teacher was so astonished by it. He asked her why she didn't wrote the abbreviation JFK instead of guessing the name. And she answered that she actually thought his name was Jean-Francois Kennedy. It wasn't write about anything, it was more like create a story. My student, 9 years old female, wrote about 2 best friends. They were at the mall when one of them got kidnapped by a villain, who put her in a suitcase and took her to London. Everyone searched for her and she was found dead. The villain had murdered her. The police arrested and imprisoned him for 10 years and then killed him. The girl's best friend was really sad and killed herself, and then they lived happy ever after. She is 9. And wrote about kidnap, murder, police violence and suicide, and romanticized suicide. 4th grade. I was teaching the kids how to write short stories. Kid wrote a story about going to a new school for the first day and being abused by teachers. It was awful. Turns out this kid was being abused by his dad and thought it was normal behavior for adults to act that way. Absolutely heartbreaking. Not a teacher. But in 3rd grade I moved to a new school. I was in a Montessori before. The new school was a Catholic school. I was a Unitarian Universalist. And we always called our preacher Reverend, not Father. In my new school, the school priest, Father Jim, was retiring and we had to write a short essay about how much we all miss him. This was like, I dunno, the 3rd day of school. I had no effing clue what the hell a Father Jim was. And since nobody bothered to write out his full name, I assumed this school just had a weird name for the gym. So of course, I wrote an essay about how much I'll miss the gym. And how terrible it's gonna be that I can't run all over it or play football in it anymore. And how terrible it is that the gym is retiring. I ended the essay wishing the gym well with its new tires. The teacher was not amused. Not a teacher. In high school we got told to write a short horror story. Someone googled short horror story, printed it out and handed it in. He literally just took a screenshot and printed it so you could see the URL and what he was watching on YouTube. Spoiler. He didn't pass. We had to write short stories in high school English. My best friend was struggling for inspiration, so me, self-absorbed teenager, told her to write about me. When I'm a beautiful, successful professional ballerina. She took the idea and ran with it, but took a dark turn. And had me read backstage by the director of the ballet company. She showed it to me proudly before class. And when she saw my face as I read it, started backpedaling hard about how it definitely wasn't about me. She just got inspired. Not an English teacher. Just a mother reading over her 10th grader son's essay 2 weeks ago. He had written something to the effect of, heaps of people have heaps of hobbies. So we had a conversation about using more academic language and employing a wider range of vocabulary. I come back 10 minutes later and he'd use the thesaurus function in Word, so it now read, piles of people have mounds of hobbies. Just, wow. Here's one I can actually answer. I was teaching an IELTS test prep class to high school aged students in China. One of my students is planning on being a nutritionist. And when I gave her a topic about what she would change if she could be the president for a day, she said that she would imprison everyone who was over a certain BMI until they were thin. And if they were repeat offenders, they should spend life in prison for wasting public resources and making healthcare more expensive for everyone else. I've had classmates submit essays copied straight up from Wikipedia, including the blue hyperlinks and all. I had a classmate in high school who once did a presentation where he just read his text off a piece of paper. The presentation included the phrase, "As a historian, I..." Not a teacher either, but I remember I had to read over a classmate's essay and he wrote about a bunch of Disney princesses going to jail on Alcatraz. That honestly sounds like a creative fanfic. I wrote an essay in 4th grade about people were all stupid and how much I hated my stupid life. The teacher gave me a B+ and said nothing more about it. Must have supplied good evidence. In 7th grade, my English teacher asked everyone in class to write a scary story. At first, I didn't really take it seriously and just wrote a goofy story about my friends and I fighting spooky monsters with Digimon. I think I literally wrote it the night before it was due and spent maybe an hour on it. My teacher apparently saw some potential. He said my story lacked originality. The context made no sense. And, overall, it wasn't a scary story. So, instead of failing me, he gave me an extension and simply said, "You can do better." That night I sat down and really thought long and hard about what was something that was truly scary. Eventually I landed on a story about a group of people in the woods who managed to stumble upon a creature that would literally suck the organs out of someone's body, leaving nothing but a husk of skin. But that it could then also perfectly mimic those it had killed, so it would use crying for help to lure people into traps. I think I spent an entire weekend rewriting it, and after I turned it in, the teacher asked me to read it to the class. Didn't make me lose hope in humanity. In fact, it shows that a good teacher can really bring out the best in a student if they just show them support.